All right, so let's go ahead and get back to it. Just want to make sure you guys remember this is our third video recording, and it's based off our first lecture. Um, this slide kind of picks up where we left off, and it's on Native American agriculture. Remember what I was talking about with your Mayan, your Aztec, your Mexica, your Olmec people, those ancient civilizations were all based on agriculture. There's no way they could grow their cities that large without developing agriculture. So they're really, really amazing, and they're really, really cool. So let's talk a little bit about agriculture. Native Americans are absolutely incredible at farming, incredible at seed production. They're again your premier farmers of the world, in my view. Probably the most important crop. And again, this is just an introduction to Native American agriculture. We're going to get back to this topic a little later in the semester, but it's kind of a prelude of what's to come. And we'll talk quite a bit about corn, but corn is arguably the most important crop, not just to Native Americans, but to the world. And wherever corn went in North America, South America, civilization would soon follow, because it could feed literally hundreds of thousands of people. And it did here. In fact, it fed millions of people. And it's a project that takes quite a long time. It's not like Native Americans decided, hey, let's invent this crop. Corn is developed from a wild plant called teosinte, and this wild plant is not even edible, and they take this wild plant and they turn it into not just one or two or three different species of corn, but literally dozens of species of corn that can be grown just about anywhere in North and South America, with the exception of the Arctic. And so corn, again, an amazing, amazing food. In addition, there's just a variety of other crops that Native Americans developed: cassava, chia, squash, pumpkin, zucchini, so many different types of squashes, so many different types of beans, tomatoes, potatoes, avocados, peanuts, including peanut butter, cacao beans, which is used to make chocolate. They learned how to process the vanilla orchid to create vanilla, strawberries, pineapples, peppers or chilies, sunflower seeds. They used rubber. They invented tobacco, coca from the coca plant, which today is used to make cocaine. Of course, Native Americans didn't use it for that purpose, but they did and still do use coca leaves for tea. And Native Americans believe that it's a sacred plant. And of course, it's been used for other more insidious purposes. But tobacco and coca leaves are Native American crops. And of course, some species of cotton as well. Again, these are just a few crops. We're going to talk a lot about Native American foods. In my view, this is one of our greatest contributions to the world. I never knew that over 50% of the foods that we eat come from Native Americans. I didn't have any idea growing up that Native Americans were inventing all these foods. And I just can't even imagine the world without chocolate or vanilla or the potato or tomatoes and avocados. I mean, pineapples. I mean, there are just so many foods that Indians invented. And imagine if those foods didn't exist. And prior to 1492, Europe, they never had a potato. And so, when I used to think of the Irish, I used to think of potato farming, but the Irish didn't have the potato until the potato was taken back to Europe. And so, anyway, these are pretty incredible foods. And let me tell you, the culinary arts would not be the same without them. All right, Indians and the federal government. Do Indians receive benefits from the federal government? Yeah, they do. They receive benefits that belong to them. And so I would argue that it's not like the federal government decides to use taxpayer money and give Indians free stuff. That's just not what's happening. And so American Indians get free, or I should say that, there I go again, getting a little tired here. American Indians get benefits that are not free. Why? Because these benefits are guaranteed in treaties. And so we already talked about treaties. There's over 370 treaties, 371 to be exact. And so what benefits are we talking about? Well, Indian health care is guaranteed to American Indians. And there's like 600 or more other programs for Native Americans, including scholarships, programs to revitalize cultures, to revitalize languages, education grants. I mean, you name it. There's so much out there for tribes to get access to. But again, these are benefits that belong to them. It's not as though the taxpayer is simply just flipping the bill. You have to think about it like this. American Indians controlled all of North America. What we call the United States was not the United States until American Indians were forced to give up those territories. So in return for having this beautiful country that we call the United States of America, the United States government made promises to American Indians. And let me tell you, you cannot put a dollar amount on it. American Indians should be, in my view, the richest ethnic group in the United States, just based on all the money that has been extracted from the land here. And in some cases, American Indians are some of the poorest people in the United States. And so American Indians don't walk out to the mailbox at the end of the month and get a free check from the federal government. Some tribes do give out benefits to their people, but those are benefits that the tribe is giving out. It belongs to the tribe. It's kind of like if our federal government decides to give us a tax break and we get money from the federal government, it's really our money because it's our government. And so these things are a little complicated, and what I try to tell people is that American Indians don't get anything for free. Whatever American Indians have, it belongs to them. Let me restate, whatever American Indians have, it belongs to them. Whatever they get from the federal government, that belongs to them too. Remember, the federal government is the trustee. The federal government is responsible for holding on to resources, providing certain programs to Native Americans. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to go back to that nation-to-nation relationship that they have. So let's move on. Do Indians pay taxes? Yeah. Federal income tax dollars? Absolutely. State income taxes? Not always. So money earned working on a reservation is not always taxed by the state. There are some benefits to living on a reservation or a rancheria. You don't have to pay for your car registration fees, and there's other taxes that you don't have to pay. As far as I'm concerned, if you are a member of a tribal community here in the United States, you probably shouldn't even have to pay taxes. You shouldn't have to file a tax return, but that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Probably a lot of people would disagree with that assessment, but I think Indians have paid enough. And so, anyway, let's move on here. Indian gaming. Why do Indians get to run casinos? Well, you have IGRA, which is the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988. Again, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988. The federal government decided that they would allow American Indians to open casinos as long as the state that the reservation was in, that the tribe was located, as long as they developed a compact with the state governments. And so here in California, the several Indian casinos, really where there's Native Americans, with the exception of Utah, there are Native American casinos. So you go to the Southwest, you're going to be able to stop and gamble at an Indian casino. And this is due to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, which was passed in 1988. However, Native Americans have been involved in gaming long before 1988. It wasn't until that period that the federal government decided that they would pass a law. But American Indians, again, they were challenging state laws, and they argued that, hey, look, we're sovereign nations. We don't have to abide by state law. And so they started doing high stakes bingo, eventually table games, and then eventually the United States federal government got involved and said, hey, look, let's just pass a law saying that they can engage in full-on Las Vegas style gaming with the okay from state governments. So technically speaking, the state governments, like the state of California, has to work in good faith with Native Americans to develop a compact if they want to build a casino. So what happens to the money earned? Well, it depends. If the tribe doesn't have the money to build the casino, they're going to have to find an outside investor. So they have to pay back the investor. And so they owe a lot of money. If the tribe is able to pay off their debts, and then they can take that money that they earn, if the casino is doing well enough and is turning a profit, they can put it back into their infrastructure. They can possibly even give tribal members per capita payments. And many tribes do, but not all tribes have a casino that's doing well enough to be able to pay their tribal members a lot of money. However, oftentimes tribal members will get preference for jobs at a casino. And so it's been something that's worked for many Native American economies. It hasn't been perfect by all means. Some tribes have been gaming for a long time, and their communities are just doing so-so. You know, here in the local area, you have Table Mountain Casino. They're doing great. But they have less than 100 tribal members, and so they're making millions of dollars every year. They've paid off the majority of their debts, I assume, and so that's a lot of money that they're making. Obviously, their tribal members are going to benefit tremendously from that. But Chikchansi, they're still in debt. Mono Wind Casino at Big Sandy Rancheria, it's a very small casino. And it's not doing nearly as well as, say, Table Mountain, or even the Tachi people at Santa Rosa. So, not all Native Americans benefit from this. However, here in California, all gaming tribes pay into a general fund that goes to non-gaming tribes. So, indirectly, even tribes that don't game, they benefit in some way. So do tribes with casinos help out tribes without casinos? Absolutely they do. Absolutely. And I have people all the time say, well, I don't understand why these tribal members, they get per capita payments. And my response to that is, well, who cares if you don't understand it? If a tribe wants to give per capita payments to their tribal members because their business is doing well, so be it. Whose business is it? It's theirs. It's not ours. It's up to them to decide what's good for their community. It's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to the community to decide. And so if community members are benefiting from it, in my view, that's tremendous and that's wonderful. I don't think anybody should be judging and saying, well, this group shouldn't get this money, or this group is doing, X, Y, and Z with their money. It's none of our business. Again, the casino business is not perfect for Native Americans. There's been a lot of problems that come with it, but some communities, it's really helped out a lot. So if there's casinos, why is there still poverty on some reservations? Well, colonialism. Native Americans are pushed off their lands, are forced into dependency. It's not like Indians decided, hey, we want to go live on a reservation and get commodities from the federal government so that we can feed our families. Native Americans are literally forced to give up their homelands, forced to give up their way of life. Their old economies were basically destroyed, and they're forced into these poverty programs. And so when people ask me, well, why do American Indians, stay on these reservations if they're so impoverished? And, my response is, well, first of all, it's their homeland. That's their community. A lot of these people, they want to stay there. They don't want to leave. They want to help out their community, but they just simply don't have the resources to be able to do some of the things that you may be able to do with your life. I mean, you have to look at America as being incredibly diverse, not just racially, but also economically speaking. And I think you guys understand this. In some communities, man, you have everything. There's, you know, hospitals and, you know, great schools, all the resources you can imagine. And then there's some communities that lack resources. Well, some Native American reservations are dealing with a lack of resources. This stems from, again, we're talking about hundreds of years of colonial rule, hundreds of years of dealing with an oppressive government that's looking to not just take your resources from you, which of course come from the land, but to have complete control over your life. And, you know, that's never a good thing for any group. And so are some communities really suffering today? Absolutely. But it's not like all Native Americans are dealing with extreme poverty. Some reservations are doing much better than others. And so I just want you guys to know, if you look at Native America today, there's a lot of diversity. Some communities are doing really well, economically speaking. Some communities not so well. But the reason why these communities are not doing so well is colonialism. And the ones that are doing better, it's because they've been able to gain control over their resources. They've been able to get control over their tribal governments. In other words, they've been able to gain sovereignty. And Harvard did a study on Native Americans, and I'll move on to the next point here after I make this one last point. They did, I think, a 7-year study on Native American communities, and they argued that Native American communities that had control over their resources, had strong tribal governments, were doing way better than communities where outsiders were coming in and telling them what's best. And so I think you guys understand this. When you have control over your life, you probably know what your needs are, where you're lacking, and you may need assistance, but ultimately you have to be the one that has to pull yourself up. And tribes have done this when they've gotten control back. So again, forced dependency on the federal government. You know, we talk about how we don't like welfare programs here, but American Indians were forced on welfare. They were forced to give up their lands, their way of life, their economy, forced to stand in lines and accept commodity foods, forced to become dependent on the federal government. And again, Native Americans are just now coming out of that process. So tribal sovereignty matters. When tribes are sovereign and allowed to run their own businesses, own government, figure out their own solutions, they do much better. And, you know, we talk about this a lot just in politics. You know, the federal government, you know, is, you know, supposed to help, you know, the people of our great country. But, you know, at times the federal government doesn't do a very good job because they don't really understand our communities. And, you know, I would argue that even like, let's just talk about Fresno for a second, that, you know, do we want to rely on people in Washington to tell us what's good for us here in Fresno? I mean, how many of them have ever been to Fresno, have lived here? I think we know what our problems are and probably would have better solutions than people who are living however many miles away Washington, D.C. is. So anyway, that's the best example that I can give. So things to know. All right, we're going to go through this quickly, but I have a pretty long list here. It's a growing list. Things to know. Never use the word squaw. It's an insult to Native American women. I know it's in a lot of our literature, but don't ever use the term. It's an insult. It's a derogatory term. Also, never say things like, "How's it going, Chief?" In traditional Native American culture, chiefs are revered individuals. There's all kinds of sayings, you know, too many chiefs, not enough Indians, let's say Indian style. Stop using those terms. They're just outdated, and in my view, they're racist, and they have no place in our society any longer. Use the name of the tribe when speaking of an indigenous nation. So if you're talking about Standing Rock Lakota people, say Standing Rock Lakota. Don't say Indians, the Indians, or the natives. That's inappropriate. If you're talking about, White Mountain Apache people say White Mountain Apache. Again, there's terms like Apache, but what Apache nation are we talking about? Are we talking about White Mountain Apache, Hickory Apache? Are we talking about um, Plains Apache, Kiowa Apache? There's all kinds of different Apache nations. And so try your best. Try your best to say the name of the tribe and get away from saying the natives or those Indians. Well, what Indians are we talking about specifically? Remember, there's a lot of different groups. And I always tell people you shouldn't make racist jokes about any racial group, but certainly not about Native Americans in my class. And there's all kinds of jokes out there, racist jokes on a lot of different ethnic groups, including Native Americans. And we shouldn't share them. We shouldn't say them. Again, you guys are getting a college education. Part of being college educated is being enlightened, being a better thinker, being less prejudiced, less stereotypical, more open-minded, less parochial or closed-minded in your thinking. And that's hopefully part of this class, is to open your mind to a culture or a bunch of different cultures, indigenous cultures, that you may have never had an opportunity to learn about. Okay. Another topic that comes up, never ask someone's blood quantum. It's disrespectful and rude. I don't think I've ever seen anybody walk up to an African American and say, hey, what's your blood quantum? Are you a quarter black? Are you a half black? Are you 3/4 black? Are you 1/8 black? 1/16 black? We just don't talk like that. But Native Americans experience that. I've had a lot of Native American students who say, well, I had somebody come up to me and they don't even know who I am. They're like, well, what's your blood quantum? What percentage of American Indian are you? And what I always tell people, if they say, well, they're 1/4, well, what part of your body is it? This quarter? If you're 1/2, is it the lower half or the upper half? I know there's a history behind blood quantum, and we already talked a little bit about it, but this is information that somebody may share with you, but I don't think it's our place to ask somebody what their blood quantum is. If they share, it's different. But I remember one time I was at Disneyland with my kids, and this is years ago, and I was in line. I don't know what ride we were waiting on. This worker was like, hey, are you Native American? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, yeah, well, what tribe, so on and so on and so on. And then they're like, well, what's your blood quantum? And, I didn't want to play the role of the teacher at the time, but I was like, hey, look, it's kind of a rude question. And so they kind of felt bad. Yeah, I tried to explain to the person it's just not something that you would ask another group, so why would you ask us that? Okay, Wounded Knee 1890 and the Ghost Dance. We're talking about 300 to 400 Lakota people being killed, not just killed, but then being buried in a mass grave. It's a horrific massacre, and let me tell you, it's not the only massacre, it's one of many. And so I just want you guys to remember that. Also, it's connected to the Ghost Dance, which is a ceremony which was developed by a Paiute prophet by the name of Wavoka. And the Lakota people, a lot of your Sioux people went to Wavoka, talked to him about his prophet, and they were holding a ghost dance ceremony. And for whatever reason, your local settlers were worried about this, and eventually our cavalry, our United States Army, came out to collect weapons from this group of Lakota. We don't know exactly how the massacre started, who fired the first shot, but what we do know is that several hundred people were murdered, including women and children. And it's not the only Indian massacre. It's one of several. But we have a lot of pictures, photographs of the massacre at least after it was over. Pretty ugly situation there. And we'll get back to that. We'll talk more about Wounded Knee. I already talked about Wounded Knee 2 in 1973, where they go back to Wounded Knee. So it's a sacred place. It's a place where people go to remember the conquest of Native America. Native Americans held Thanksgiving ceremonies long before Europeans arrived. The concept of Thanksgiving is not new to Native Americans. We held ceremonies to give thanks for the corn, to give thanks for the plants that we harvested, the plants that we consumed, the animals that we hunted. And so we had a lot of Thanksgiving ceremonies. In fact, I would argue that the idea or concept of Thanksgiving is very much embedded in Native American cultures. Every day we should give thanks, right? Not just one day a year. The Wampanoag. The Wampanoag people are the people of the first light. Now, some people are, probably thinking back to maybe their early childhood education, and when they learn about Thanksgiving, they learn about the Indians, but you probably never ever thought, well, who are those Indians? Remember what I said, it's inappropriate to say the Indians. So those Indians are the Wampanoag. And so the Wampanoag and the so-called Pilgrims had supposedly had a Thanksgiving feast together. Again, the Wampanoag are called people to first light. Their story, it's really, really sad, because they shelter and feed your so-called pilgrims. They help them settle here. They agree not to attack them. And then, down the road, eventually the Wampanoag are nearly completely wiped out. The Wampanoag leader, Massasoit, he passes away, and his son, Metacomet, he takes over the reins of the Wampanoag nation, and a war breaks out between the Wampanoag and the English, they just nearly completely destroy the Wampanoag. They capture Metacomet. He's killed, he's decapitated. They quarter his body, they take his head, they put it on a post where it stands in front of Plymouth for nearly 2 decades. And so, and I'm sure you didn't hear that story in elementary school. I'm sure you're thinking, I don't recall doing that when I took my paper bag to school and made my little war bonnet and Indian vest. So we rarely get the truth. We rarely get the real facts. But don't forget, people, the first light, Wampanoag. Thanksgiving is coming up, and so you can ask your family members, hey, have you ever thought, who are those Indians that had Thanksgiving with the so-called Pilgrims? I'm sure nobody would know. Now you know, Wampanoag. Pequot. The Pequot people were a very powerful group of Native Americans, and in 1637 they are massacred by our English settlers at Mystic River, and again 1637. This is a brutal massacre, and you can read up on it, Google it if you want. I mean, we're talking about it's really gory. They murder hundreds of people, attempt to burn they actually burn people alive in their homes. And then there is a day of thanks that they have for like the next 100 years. I mean, it's, again, celebrating imperialism and genocide. It's an ugly thing. Pocahontas. I know some of you are probably thinking, Pocahontas, we're going to learn about her. Well, a little bit. She's a real Native American. She was a Powhatan a tribal member and the daughter of a very powerful leader. She did not marry John Smith. They were not lovers, contrary to popular belief. She married a John, but it was a John Roth. But this is after she was kidnapped and forced to live as a captive in an English settlement. And then eventually she makes that transformation from a Native American woman to somebody who is Christian. She adopts Christianity, and she also takes on a new name European name, she becomes Rebecca, and then eventually she marries John Roth, one of our first tobacco planters in North America. Becomes a very, very rich man. And of course, tobacco is one of those cash crops that comes originally from Native Americans that helps spur on the Industrial Revolution. And so some of these crops like tobacco and cotton, which drive the Industrial Revolution, come from Native Americans. And so we play a role, at least in part, with the development of our industrial societies. But back to Pocahontas, very sad story. She dies probably before she's 20. She travels back to Europe and she gets sick there, and she dies, and she's actually buried there. So a very sad story. Don't believe all the nonsense in Disney. Stop watching Disney. Get rid of all your Disney films. I tell all my students that Disney's evil. It's just a joke. I wouldn't say Disney's evil, but Disney promotes a lot of racial and gender stereotypes. But if you want to learn more about Pocahontas, there's some really, really good books. You can send me an email. If you have any question about any of these historical events, any of these people, and you're looking for information, shoot me an email and I'll send you a title of a book. I mean, I may not have all the answers, but I'll try to point you in the right direction. All right. Indian mascots are insulting and racist to many, but not all Native Americans. We don't all agree that mascots are bad. I don't like Indian mascots. I don't like the Washington Redskin logo or that term, Washington Redskin. I don't like the use of Native American imagery for sporting events, but that's just me. Not all Indians agree. Personally, I think it's insulting to have Native American religious items, things that are used in ceremonies, religious ceremonies, to be used on a football field, or for people to take a feather, what's supposed to be an eagle feather, something that is sacred to Native Americans, a spiritual object, and then to wave it around at a game, or to put it in a so-called war bonnet. I don't know, I just think that's absurd. I don't know, if you were Catholic and you went to a football game and people were waving around rosary beads, you know, I think you'd probably be insulted. Well, these objects like the hand drum, paint, feathers, these are sacred items. They're used in ceremonies, and I don't know, it dehumanizes Native Americans in my view. It creates and promotes more stereotypes. But again, not all Native Americans agree. We're not in complete agreement about the issues. Some Native Americans, they don't care. You guys know this, Christopher Columbus did not discover America. We just had our anti-Christopher Columbus event on, let's see, it was October 9th, and it was really great. We were on the news, so you can check it out. One of our local news stations did a story on it. And I always tell people, Christopher Columbus discovering America, it's like me walking into your house and discovering your flat screen TV set and all your other possessions and then walking out with it. I mean, no, it doesn't work. There's millions of people living in the Americas. There's all these different civilizations. He didn't even know where he was. No, he did not discover America. Additionally, he never even made it to North America. He made it to the Caribbean and to South America, I think, on his last voyage, his fourth and last voyage, but he never made it to North America. And he was kind of an asshole, too. He murdered and killed and set in motion a really horrible genocide. Most tribes are matriarchal, meaning women held positions of power and were respected. We live in a patriarchal society, so it's a male-driven society. Most Native American societies, probably around 85% of them, were matriarchal. And so when you married, you often went to go live with the wife's family, so they were matrilocal, so the husband lives with the wife's family. Women were given a lot of respect. The kids belonged to the woman's tribe. They took the woman's clan or band. Child abuse, domestic violence was very rare in these societies as well. The stereotype is Native American societies are warlike, but the reality is that Native American communities, for the most part, were very peaceful. We didn't have a lot of weapon systems. We didn't utilize gunpowder. We didn't utilize steel. Did Native Americans fight with one another? Absolutely. Were Native Americans in some cases very violent to one another? Yes, but on a minimal scale. Native Americans were not running around North America scalping and murdering each other. That is a stereotype, a racist stereotype, and it's just not true. Now, when Europeans come, do Native Americans attempt to defend their homelands from this invasion? Absolutely they do. Do they kill? Do they murder to defend their homelands, to protect their children? Yes, they do. But to say that Native Americans and Native American society and culture is somehow inherently violent is absurd and absolutely ridiculous. Most Native American societies were peaceful, not warlike. Some of these communities didn't even have a name for war in their language. In California, tribes were pretty egalitarian and didn't have a lot of conflict with other communities. And if they did have a conflict, it was minimal. There was one quote I read regarding Native American warfare by a colonist, and he wrote, this is about Native Americans back east who were supposedly more warlike, more apt to take up arms and defend their communities. He wrote, Indians might fight for 7 years and not kill 7 people. So anyway, we'll get back to that. We'll talk more about Native American warfare, Native American weapons, and Native Americans. They did have some pretty interesting weapons by all means. But the idea that they were just running around killing each other is just absurd. Also, many Native American nations were farmers and agriculturalists. We already talked about that. Indians engaged in farming. This was the norm for some Native American communities. You know, you grow your crops as opposed to just simply hunting and gathering. They did that too, but they also engaged in farming. Eagle feathers are sacred. Face paints, not war paint, is sacred. The drum is sacred. And Indians do not chant. They vocalize, right? But they do not chant. So anyway, just remember, eagle feathers, these are sacred. Not everybody is going to be given an eagle feather. You usually have to do something to earn it. Paint, sacred. Some people call it war paint. I don't know why. You know, in my culture, we utilize paint. It's not called war paint. And the drum is sacred. And we sing. We don't chant, we sing. Anyway, I want to show you guys some pictures here. This is a Nootka man from the Pacific Northwest. And this picture is from Edward Curtis. And I just like it. And he just looks really cool. And unlike a lot of Native Americans, he has a goatee. Also has a septum piercing, and his hair is pretty short as well. Maybe he's in mourning. I don't know, but his hair is short. It's possible. This is Chief Joseph, a very important Native American Nez Perce leader, and really powerful Native American political leader. And war chief as well. It's an Apache woman. The Apache are from the Southwest. I think she's Chiricahua Apache. Again, just showing you some different pictures of indigenous people. This is a Kiowa chief. I'll give you his name here in a second. Let's see. His title is, and actually, it's kind of funny, Chief White Man. So anyway, I kind of like it. This guy has a beautiful breastplate. You see the eagle feather right here is eagle feather, and you can see a plume, eagle plume. His hair is wrapped up in fur, so his braids are wrapped up in fur, and yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful picture. This is a Kwakiutl girl, and you can see those really beautiful abalone shell earrings, which is a sign that she's of high status. Again, really beautiful picture. This is an Arikara man, and if you look closely, he's wrapped up in a bear skin. So he's utilizing that bear medicine. And another picture here. This is a Jicarilla Apache, and he's Apache chief Vashgon. So he's Jicarilla Apache, and the Jicarilla Apache are from New Mexico. Again, you see the eagle feather in his hair there. Braids are tied up nicely, and it looks like he has this beautiful beaded work. Long braids, you can see his braids come down. So anyway, these people had beautiful hair, beautiful, just beautiful, beautiful people. Took pride in how they looked as well. This is Hollow Horn Bear, and he is I believe it's Lakota, but I want to make sure here. I want to take a look. Yeah, Siniconju Lakota. You can see he's wearing a medallion. Looks like a peace medal. He's got 2 eagle feathers, hair's braided, and beautiful beadwork here, beadwork there. Anyway, very handsome. Fry bread. I don't know if any of you guys like fry bread. I personally do. Fry bread, I always tell people, it tastes good, but it's not good for you. We shouldn't be eating too much fry bread. And it's hard to find good fry bread. This is Navajo bread. So Navajo fry bread, I think, is particularly good. And what I thought was interesting, I was just reading an article, and a lot of Navajo people are getting away from eating the fry bread because it's not very good for their bodies. It's, colonial food, and a lot of Navajo people are getting away from it, but it tastes so darn good. So my advice, if you've never tried it, definitely try it. Some Indian people that make it, they'll put beans and meat and some type of salsa on there with some cheese, lettuce, tomato, and go at it. Indian taco. There's also a Navajo burger too. They take a big piece of fry bread and they take 2 hamburger patties, put it right in there with your lettuce and tomato, and then together. And ooh, I've had those, and those are really good too. Probably not very good for you, but they taste good. I say let's decolonize our diets. Let's stop eating that processed food. Let's stop drinking sodas and eating all that junk, which is hard to do. I know, because it's everywhere, and we should eat what our ancestors ate. It's probably better for us. This is Osceola. He is a very important a Native American warrior, and led a small band of Seminole warriors in resistance to the United States efforts to remove the tribe. There's a typo there. I hate typos. So it should be efforts to remove the tribe from its native lands during the Second Seminole War. I'll fix that later. Anyway, Osceola, amazing, amazing example of Native American military leadership. And we were talking about how peaceful we are, but then you look at this weapon here. Look what I said, Indians are peaceful, but look at this weapon. Well, it's kind of like a lot of Americans, including myself, we own weapons, we own guns for personal protection, home defense, whatever you want to call it. but do we ever take it out and point it at somebody? I hope you're not doing that. I certainly don't. It's there just in case. And so Native Americans had weapons like this. It looks like it's some metal inlay, which is not traditional. Native Americans probably started doing this after Europeans arrived. But Indians, contrary to popular myth, did not fight or do battle with bows and arrows. Probably use clubs. Very primitive technology. However, if you were to take that club and swing it, it's awfully dangerous. And if you were to hit somebody, you could easily kill them. I like this right here. I think you're going to like this too. I'll read. This is Sitting Bull, and it says, warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights because no one has a right to take another life. The warrior for us is one who sacrifices himself for the good of others. His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of humanity. Sitting Bull. Isn't that beautiful? Anyway, he was a great Lakota leader. He was eventually killed as an old man after he settled on a reservation, partly because of the hysteria around the ghost dance. Again, another picture I just wanted to show you, just a wide range of Native American photos. And you can see these are, oh gosh, I think they're Sock Fox people. And you can see their tomahawks are hatchets. They're also pipes as well. If you look closely, there's a pipe bowl. And so on one end you have the hatchet, other side of the hatchet you have the pipe bowl. And these are bear people too, because you can see their bear necklaces. Anyway, really cool. That's the old, and this is the new. This is Frank Wan. He is a Lakota artist, rapper, and I just wanted to show you that, you know, Native Americans still carrying on their culture today. You can see Frank Wan, this is him right here up front, and some of the people in his group dressed in traditional regalia. We don't call them costumes. Don't call them costumes. It's regalia. These are the Schimmel sisters. They're basketball players, and they are Native American. The one on the right here, she made it to the what's it called? The WNBA. WNBA. And I think she's still playing too. And these are the Thompson brothers and cousin, two brothers and a cousin, world-class lacrosse players. And so make sure you make a note of this. Lacrosse is a Native American game invented and played by Native Americans long before Europeans arrived here. And these are some of the best lacrosse players in the world. All right, some Native American ancient dwellings here. This is located on the Navajo Reservation in northern Arizona, and it includes a series of dwellings constructed by your ancient Puebloan people, also known as the Anasazis, although the term Anasazi is kind of outdated. Ancient Puebloan is a much better term to use. These are longhouses, and your Iroquois people made longhouses and wigwams and dugout canoes, and this is back east. So if you look here, you have homes that are built in the Southwest, made out of adobe, and then you have homes that are made out of birch bark, and they're quite a bit different. And so Native American houses, you know, they range from, you know, your teepee to your Pueblo homes that are made out of adobe, to your plank houses that are made out of red cedar or cedar trees, to your long houses that are made out of birch bark. And that's it. All right, let's stop this. Lecture number 1 completed.